the wrong hymn.
The bulb in the kitchen went out sometime in August, and I had not gotten around to it, so by October I was using the lamp again. I kept it on the table where my mother used to keep it. The wick wanted trimming, but it would hold another week. I ate what was there. Half a tin of beans warmed on the stove, the heel of a loaf, an apple from the tree by the shed that was more brown than red and tasted like not much. I ate standing up at the counter, and then I sat down and finished the coffee from the morning. It was cold, but it was made already. The dog wanted out, so I let him out. He went off down the path toward the spring the way he always did, nose low, not in any hurry. I watched him from the porch until he was past the dogwood, and then I went back in for my coat. It had got cold faster than I expected this year. There was frost on the rail, and the boards were wet from where it had melted off in the sun and then refrozen. I walked the line of the fence down to the road and back. The road was empty. It is almost always empty. A truck passes maybe twice a day, and I know both trucks. Coming back up the slope, I had to stop once. I put my hand on the post and waited. A heaviness behind the breastbone. It passed. I went on up. I brought in firewood. 4 pieces, which was what I could carry, and then I went back for 4 more. The second trip my hands felt far away from me. I stacked the wood by the stove the way my granddaddy stacked it, bark side down, and I built up the fire and stood there a minute with my palms toward it until I could feel them again. The banjo leaned in the corner by the bookcase where it had leaned since I brought it back. I have not had to change a string on it. The head is the original head. The skin is dark in a ring where his thumb sat. I do not touch it every day. Some days I walk past it the way you walk past a clock. My granddaddy was a quiet man. He had a watch he wore on the inside of his wrist, face turned in, and he would check it with a small movement nobody else noticed. He taught me to tie 3 knots and to gut a fish and to keep my mouth shut around men who drank. He did not teach me to play. He showed me the chord shapes once, sitting on the porch the summer I was 12, and then he put the banjo down and said there was a key he was not going to show me because it was not his to turn. He said it the way he said other things, looking at the floorboards, and he did not say it again. I asked him about it one more time years later, and he looked at me like he could not remember saying it. He was old by then. The dog came back and scratched at the door, and I let him in. He drank from his bowl and lay down by the stove, and that was that. I sat at the kitchen table with the lamp between me and the window. The window had my face in it, and behind my face the dark yard, and behind the yard the ridge. I could hear the stove ticking as it heated, and I could hear the small sounds a house makes when it is settling for the night, and underneath both of those I could hear my own breath going in and out. I sat there a while longer, and then I got up and went over to the corner and brought the banjo back with me. I rested it across my lap the way I always rest it, the neck out over my left knee, the pot up against my belly where it has worn a small shine into the flannel of more than one shirt. The strap I never use was looped around the peg head the way I leave it. I tuned it by ear. The low string I brought down a step the way I always bring it down for this one, and I checked it against the short string with my thumb, and it was close enough. I sat with it a minute before I played. The cold was coming in around the window sash, and I got up and opened the window an inch and sat back down. I like the cold on my hands when I play. I started in. The thumb found the short string, and the back of my finger came down across the others the way it had been coming down across them since I was a boy, and the low string rang under all of it. My hands knew. The fingernail caught and let go and caught and let go, and the tune came up under it. It is a tune I have known my whole life. I will not say its name. My mouth started to shape the words. I was not singing out loud, not really. More a moving of the mouth and a small sound in the throat, the way a man hums to himself when he is alone and not putting on. I sang the first verse the way I have always sung it. Then in the second verse a word came out that was not the word I learned. I noticed it. It was close to the word, near enough that I might have just slurred it, but it was not the word. I kept playing. My granddaddy played this one. He played it slow. He played most things slow, and when other men sped up around him on the porch, he would let them go on without him and come back in at the end. I remember one time he was playing it by himself on the back step. This would have been a Sunday because his good shoes were on. He played the first part through, and then he stopped right at the turn, and he sat there with his hand flat on the head of the banjo, holding it still, not tuning, not thinking about tuning. Just his hand laid flat on the skin to stop it ringing. He sat like that maybe a count of 10, and then he got up and went inside and did not come back out with the banjo. He came back out with a cup of water and drank it on the step and looked at the yard. I was maybe 9. I did not ask him. There was a thing he kept in his right front pocket. I only saw it the one time. He had set it on the windowsill above the kitchen sink while he washed his hands, and I came in for something and saw it there. It was a folded piece of paper, folded small and folded again, gone soft at the creases the way paper goes when it has lived in a pocket a long time. I did not open it. He came back from the sink and picked it up without drying his hands all the way and put it back in his pocket, and that was that. I never saw it again. I played the tune through twice. The second time I let the low string ring a little longer between the brushes. My shoulder was sitting easy. The pot was warm against my belly from my own warmth coming back into it. Outside the window the yard was the yard. The dog was where he had been by the stove, his one back leg out the way he sleeps. I started it a third time. The thumb found the short string, and the back of my finger came down across the others, and the tune started up the way it had started the other 2 times. I let the brushes sit a little wider apart. The low string took the space and held it. I played the first part through. My mouth moved on the words, and I let it. The kitchen was the kitchen. The lamp was burning steady. The stove was ticking the way the stove ticks when it is past the loud part of being hot and into the quieter part. Somewhere in the second part, the low string went on under me longer than it had been going on. It had been a string. It kept being a string. But it was also laying down a road. I noticed it. I kept playing. The dog got up. I heard him before I saw him. The click of his nails on the boards as he came around the stove. He went to the window. He stood there with his nose to the gap where the sash was open the inch. He did not whine. He did not look back at me. He stood there the way he stands when there is something out past the dogwood and he is working out what it is. I did not call him. My hands were playing. A note bent up under my finger that I had not bent. Or I had bent it and forgotten that I bent it in the half-second between the bending and the hearing. It was a small bend, a quarter step maybe. It went where it was going and came back. I kept playing. The cold coming in around the sash was not the same cold. It had been Appalachian cold, wet at the edges. Now it was drier. It came in thinner and went further into the room before it gave up. There was something in it I did not have a name for. Not wood smoke, not the spring. I noticed it on the backs of my hands first and then along the side of my neck. The dog had not moved from the window. I played on into the turn. The chair was where the chair had been, but the floor felt a little further from the chair than it had been a minute ago. Not much. The way a step feels when you misjudge it in the dark and your foot comes down and the floor is there, but it is a half-inch lower than your foot expected. My breath was going in and out, and I could hear it a beat after I made it, which I put down to the room being quiet. I came around through the turn and back into the first part. My hands knew where they were going. The tune was the tune. I had played it twice already tonight and 1,000 times before tonight, and the shape of it in my hands was the shape it had always been. Only the low string was longer now. It went out from under the brushes and kept going, and I could feel it going out past the window and out past the yard, out to where the dog was looking. The dog put his front paws up on the sill. He did not bark. He stood there with his weight forward on the sash and his nose at the inch of open air. I watched him do it without stopping the tune. After a minute he came down off the sill. He did not come back to the stove. I thought about getting up and closing it. I did not get up. My hands were still playing, and the low string was still going, and the cold was coming in the way it was coming in now, and I sat there with the banjo across my lap and let it. The lamp was steady, the stove was ticking. The yard outside the window was the yard. I could see it past the dog. The dogwood was where it had been. The fence was where it had been. The ridge was a darker line behind the rest of the dark. I went on into the second part again. The second part went the way it had been going. The low string under the brushes and the brushes coming down on top of it, and my mouth shaping the words without sound. I played it through once and started it again. Somewhere out past the porch, a long note came in on top of mine. Not a fiddle, not a guitar, something blown. There was breath in it the way there is breath in a man's voice when he is keeping a word going past where the word ought to end. It was brass sounding, or it had reed in it, I could not tell which. It came up from down the hollow somewhere, and it bent the way a voice bends, sliding up and easing back, and it sat on top of the low string and walked along with it. I did not stop playing. I noticed it the way I had noticed the cold. It was there, and it was not from here. The note went out, and another came in behind it, and the two of them made a line that went over the top of what I was doing and did not interfere with it. It was a line that moved in a way I had no shape for. It would go up, and then it would slip down underneath itself before it came back. I had never heard a horn do that, if it was a horn. I kept playing. Then there was a fiddle in the room. It came in low at first under my brushes, where the low string was already laying its road. It came in the way a man comes in when he has been listening a while and knows where to step. It laid a line on top of my drone and walked alongside it. It did not hurry. It did not try to lead. It moved with me into the turn and bent up where I bent up and let off where I let off. I did not look up. My hands were playing. The fiddle went on. After a few measures, I knew it was a man playing it. I knew it the way you know which side of you a person is sitting on without turning your head. Then I knew who it was. There was a thing in the way the bow let off at the end of the line, a small lift that was his lift. I had watched him do it on the back step 100 Sundays. My chest knew. I kept playing. I kept playing. I did not look. The fiddle stayed with me. It was not loud. It was the way he had always played, half a step behind the front of the beat, letting the tune come to him. The bow moved across the strings, and the strings answered, and the answer sat next to my drone the way two men sit on a porch when there is nothing they need to say. Past the dog, the yard was not the yard. I caught it on the in-breath between the turn and the first part. The dogwood was still there. The fence was still there. But behind the fence, the ground went up where the ridge had been, and it was not the ridge. It was cut into steps. Long, flat steps going up the slope of a hill that was higher than my ridge and browner. Something was growing on the steps in rows. There were low walls of stone holding the steps in place, and the stone was a color the stone here is not. I could see a piece of road switching back up through it. There were no lights on the road. I kept playing. The fiddle kept playing. A smell came in around the sash with the cold. It was a cooking smell, but not a smell from my kitchen and not a smell from any kitchen I had been in. There was something burnt in it and something sweet and a spice I had never put in my mouth. It was the smell of somebody else's supper. It came in and went through the room and left. The dog was still at the window. He had his head low and his ears forward, and he was watching the steps go up the hill. He did not look back at me. My mouth was still moving on the words. I noticed and did not stop. The word my mouth was shaping was not an English word. It was not slurred, and it was not wrong. It was a word. It sat in my mouth the way a word sits when it belongs there. I did not know what it meant. My mouth knew. I let it go on. The horn line outside was still working over the top of all of it. It had come closer, or I had gotten used to it. It bent up under itself and came back the way it had been doing, and it fit with the fiddle the way the fiddle fit with me. The drone underneath, the fiddle alongside, the horn over the top from out past the dogwood somewhere. I played into the turn, and the fiddle came up with me. The lift in the bow was where the lift had always been. The floor was a little further from the chair than it had been. I noticed that and went on. I came around through the turn into the first part again. My hands knew where they were going. The fiddle knew where I was going. Out past the dog, the steps went up the hill in the dark, and the road switched back through them, and the smell came in again and went out again, and the horn from down the hollow held a long note and let it bend. I went on playing. And the first part came around again, and my hands were where they had been. The brushes came down, and the low string lay under them, and the fiddle lay alongside, and the horn line held over the top. Nothing was loud. There was a lot of it, and none of it was loud. The heaviness behind the breastbone was back. It had come back without my noticing it come. I noticed it now, the way I had noticed it on the slope coming up from the road, and I knew it the way I had known it then. I had put my hand on the post that time and waited. I did not have a post. I had the banjo across my lap and my hands on it and the tune going. I kept playing. The fiddle had moved. It was not next to me anymore. It was a step out in front of me on the line. Not far. The bow was still doing the lift at the end of the line, and the lift was where the lift had always been. He was not going faster. He was just out a little ahead. I followed where I had been walking alongside. I did not look up. My mouth was still working on the word that was not an English word. It had got easier to shape. The first time it had sat in my mouth, and I had let it sit there. Now my mouth was making it the way a mouth makes a word it has said before. I noticed that and went on. There is a name for what I am doing, but it is not in any language I learned. The cold around the sash had thinned out further. It was not cold the way the kitchen had been cold. It was the cold of being higher up than the kitchen was. The smell came in again, the burnt and the sweet and the spice, and this time it did not leave on the same breath. It stayed in the room with the rest of it. The dog turned his head from the window and looked at me. He looked at me a moment. Then he turned back to the window and put his nose where it had been. My hands were lighter on the banjo. Not much. The pot was where it had been against my belly, but the weight of the neck out over my left knee had gone off some. I kept the shape my hands had been making. The shape was making the sound the shape had always made. I came around through the turn. The fiddle came around ahead of me and waited a half beat in the new measure for me to come into it, and I came into it, and we went on. Past the dog, the steps were where they had been. The road was switching back the way it had been switching back. I did not look long. I had looked once. It was there. My hands were playing. The lamp on the table between me and the window was burning the way it had been burning. The wick wanted trimming. It had wanted trimming since August. The flame sat up straight in the chimney and did not move, and then it moved once. A small dip, the way a flame dips when a door has been opened in another room. There was no other room. I noticed it. I went on playing. The floor was further from the chair than it had been. I was not going to put my feet down to check. My feet were where they had been on the rung. The rung was holding them. The fiddle was a step ahead of me on the line, and the horn line was over the top of both of us from out past the dogwood, and the drone was going out from under all of it the way it had been going, out past the window, out past the yard, out where the road switched back through the steps and kept going. I was on the road. I had been on the road since the slope. I kept playing. The tune came around into the first part again, and my hands knew where they were going. The fiddle knew where I was going. He had always known. I followed the lift in the bow into the new measure. The new measure was the same measure it had always been. My breath was easier. I noticed that. I had been hearing it a beat after I made it, and now I was not hearing it at all, or I was not listening for it. I could not tell which. The banjo was lighter against my belly. My hands were far away from me, and they were playing. The dog did not turn around again. Out past the sash, the horn held a long note and let it bend, and the fiddle a step ahead of me bent up with it, and my low string went out under both of them and kept going. The lamp dipped once more and came back. The wick.
Started a tune at the kitchen table, same one my granddaddy played. Banjo I've been holding since the war ended, same string I never had to change. Hands knew what they always knew. Mouth started shaping something else. Drone lay down a road that wasn't there before, and the road went past myself. The drone knows where I am better than I do. I'm playing one mountain and another's bleeding through. There's a name for what I'm doing, but it ain't in any language I learned. There's a key my granddaddy never showed me, 'cause the key wasn't his to turn. Windows open, dog won't come in. Whatever's out there got the dog spooked too. The fiddle laid a line on top of my drone, said, "Come on, I'll walk with you." The drone knows where I am better than I do. I'm playing one mountain and another's bleeding through. Saw a city I'd never been to, saw it through my own front door. Heard a sax up over the hollow, like it knew the song before. Heard my own voice in two tongues, both of them mine, neither one knew. And the highlands I was born to met the highlands I've been walking through. The drone knows where I am better than I do. I'm playing one mountain and another's coming through. I'm playing one mountain and another's coming